quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Hey, we're back in the studio. You're listening to this edition of The Business Side of Music. Here's an interesting one for you. You're a musician, and you're on the road, and you're touring, and you've got chronic back pain from sleeping in the tour buses and getting jostled around, or, you know, you're finding that your hands just aren't playing as well, fatigue. We got an interesting guest to help us with all that today. Dr. Bearden's here with Action Spine and Joint. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bob.
This is a little different, but I will tell you, we've touched on this in the past. We had a physical therapist a few months ago who went over some of these things. But typically in the music business, we're probably the least healthiest people. We eat the worst food. Just look at me. And we don't necessarily take care of ourselves. Chiropractic help, which a lot of people either don't know what chiropractors do, because it really is, it's not, I guess maybe we should, it's non-surgical,
right? First
of all. And it's an alternative way to not only get to feeling better, but have a little more healthy body. And of course, you have a healthy body, you have a healthy attitude and healthy mind. Let's start from the beginning. So first of all, how'd you get into doing what you're doing?
Straight out of high school, I went into the military and got my training in X-ray technology. And shortly thereafter, I started working in a couple of orthopedic clinics in the local Auburn, Opelika area, which is where I was going to school.
An Alabama boy.
Alabama, well, yes, Auburn. Where.
So we shouldn't say Roll Tide.
Right, it's the opposite, the polar opposite there, yes. War Eagle, in fact. And I was working there, helping put myself through undergrad, and I was working in the local emergency room as well as a couple of orthopedic clinics. And I was actually in pre-veterinarian medicine, ironically. But about the second year, like many college students, they kind of have a change of heart and start looking into other things. And I was just really getting into the anatomy and physiology of the human body and working with, X-rays and in that whole realm of human health and restoration, sports injuries, stuff like that. I knew I didn't want to go the hospital route per se, or the drugs and surgery route. And so I had a couple of really good friends of mine that were off into chiropractic school at another place in this particular situation in Iowa. I kept in touch with them quite a bit. I just started doing my research on a change of career, and something about that just really appealed to me as far as just being an entrepreneur, not really working in a hospital environment. And I just made almost an overnight decision and never looked back.
And gone from there.
Yes.
And then you started Action Spine and Joint here in Nashville. How long has that been running?
Straight out of school, actually, 25 years ago.
Wow. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's been in the same location since then.
You've hit an anniversary.
The landlord owes me more than one steak dinner for being here that entire time, yes.
Well, we'll make sure he's listening so you can pay up on that.
That's right.
So not only that, you're also author of a book?
Yes, two books, actually.
Two books, okay.
Yes,
you're an author of two books.
Yes.
And those are?
Chiropractic Way to Health, which was my first one, written back in 2006. And it's really a guide that was written as a supplement to the patient's care. It has a lot of exercise, a lot of nutritional and just daily activity modifications to do to complement their current care they're undergoing with us. And then the second book was about 5 years later, and it was called Avoiding Back Surgery, basically. And it was just kind of a compilation of the different therapies, different approaches, different philosophies to essentially be preemptive with one's health care and keeping them out of the doctor's offices, much less off the surgical table, short-term and long-term.
One of the things that I see a lot of, having spent all the years on the road that I did, is musicians. And that's obviously always our focus here on the show, is helping artists and musicians. They come off the road and, I've said it before, they're fatigued, they're worn out, they're tired, their back is all jacked up. So you can go to wherever you go. You can go to that chiropractor, or you can go to maybe the surgical doctor to get things taken care of. It goes beyond that. You need to be healthy, and you need to know what you should do to keep your back and other parts of your body in shape. So it's a tune-up of sorts, I guess we could say.
It is. A lot of people use chiropractic for maintenance. And look, chiropractic now is so mainstream. Such a large percentage of the population uses chiropractors versus, say, 20, 30 years ago, that it's really not considered alternative anymore. It's pretty much a complementary approach to healthcare.
It has become more mainstream.
It has. In fact, I mean, there's so much literature proving the efficacy and the overall effectiveness of chiropractic for the conditions that we deal with, that it has become mainstream. And the public really, especially the baby boomers that are aging and turning the Medicare age every day, I mean, they're demanding non-surgical, drug-free approaches to healthcare. They still want to be on the golf course and the tennis courts when they're 85 years of age. And they want to do it without being drugged and cut and having to suffer all the side effects that come with that. And so they're taking matters in their own hand and have been for the past 20, 30 years. But like I said, there's so much research and objective findings on what we do that we just didn't have 30, 40 years ago, even though at that time we knew it worked and the public knew it worked, but just not on a mass scale. But it's such a large percentage of the population that use chiropractors anymore, and a lot of times they use us as primary care physicians. I mean, our background training is in primary care, and so the federal government considers chiropractors to be primary care physicians, even though insurance companies still consider us to be specialists. But a lot of people use their chiropractors for that, from a preventative point of view, with the objective of, once again, having to hoping to keep them out of the other doctors' offices that entail more invasive interventions.
I think you brought up a valid point where, especially baby boomers such as myself and my wife. Now, Will Carter's in the room with us today. I don't think he's quite the baby boomer yet. I think he still doesn't have much gray hair, if any, in his head.
He's right there with me.
But Will Carter from Music Starts Here is sitting in with us today in the studio. Question, when you talk about alternative medicines, and we're starting to realize, and I'm glad you brought this up, because the baby boomers, we're now seeing Mick Jagger, we're seeing Ozzy Osbourne, we're seeing Stevie Nicks, we're seeing a lot of tours, a lot of great bands, kind of that whole baby boomer generation. They're starting to cancel their shows because they're not as healthy as they used to be. The baby boomer generation, you're absolutely right. I grew up, my parents taking me to a chiropractor when I was a kid and getting adjusted, staying away from the medications if you didn't need them, that healthy approach. I'm going to jump back into the musicians and the artists, because that's obviously our bread and butter on this show. Those are the guys and gals, I should say, who have abused their bodies for a long time, either medicinally or in a physical sense or in a mental sense because of, being on the road for long durations. Let's talk about how they can avoid some of those perils and pitfalls from a chiropractic standpoint.
So musicians, in so many cases, they've been playing their musical instruments since they were 4 years of age.
Yeah.
And spending hours upon hours every day, much like a professional athlete, in some cases more hours than a professional athlete, in the field playing their instrument, pressing on hard surfaces, carrying these instruments more on one side of their body than the other, and just repetitively using certain muscle groups and underusing other muscle groups, which is a very subtle thing that builds up over time and results in a lot of chronic ailments. I mean, musicians are essentially, for all intents and purposes, instrumental athletes. for a lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And so, these athletes they train like athletes, professional athletes on that level, day in and day out. Even the amateur ones, they train like professionals day in and day out just by using their instruments so many hours. And in certain positions, you take a drummer, for example, they're overusing their hip flexors and they're underusing what we call hip extensors, which are like your glutes, for example. And they end up with a lot of chronic low back pain, a lot of hip pain. Then you got the roadies jumping off, these, different platforms and unloading, loading trucks and bending, twisting, stooping, sleeping on foreign mattresses. And all this stuff builds up over time in what we call repetitive stress injuries. And once you use a set of muscles over the course of time, they get shortened and they become chronically stiff and achy. Scar tissue starts to set in. You start to get all kind of accelerated aging with calcium deposits. I just took an x-ray of a guitarist the other day. He was 38 years of age, and he was in a heavy metal band, shaking his head up and down for many years violently, and he was having this chronic neck pain with sharp shooting pain into his arms. Took an x-ray of him, and his spine looked like a 95-year-old. It was just chewed up with all kind of arthritis and scar tissue, and you could see it in his range of everything was just totally mutilated, and he was just having a lot of chronic reoccurring pain at 38 years of age. And he probably could have prevented a lot of that had he just known certain stretching techniques to do versus just kind of getting off the bus and going and jumping up and down on the stage. And perhaps he had some injuries along the way, but some simple preventative chiropractic adjustments keeping the spine and the joints in alignment would have gone a long way with him.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, let's talk about what that routine should be for especially that person on the road or just the average Joe on the street, or Jill, whoever. There's definitely a routine that you need to get into to get healthy and then remain healthy.
Before you start having severe pain.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We're in the studio today with Dr. Bearden. He's with Action Spine and Joint here in Nashville, Tennessee. 25 years in the business, same location.
Many, many patients.
Yeah. And you're listening to this edition of...
Hi, this is Emily Satterley, founder of ittydiddy.com, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag, that's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to the business side of music.
We're back in the studio. Dr. Bearden with Action Spine and Joint here in Nashville, Tennessee. And Will Carter from Music Starts Here has joined me. Welcome, Will.
Hey, Bob. Great to be here.
Hey, glad you're here. Let's talk a little bit about that routine that they get into. Now, I spent close to 2 decades on tour buses, and I can tell you it was probably some of my best sleep. Mm-hmm. But also when I got home, then it was like you have that period of adjustment, and you got to leave a fan running so you have noise.
Yeah. Right.
And, a lot of musicians, a lot of artists that are on the road, they don't think about this, strapping that 15, 20-pound guitar on their neck or that drummer playing or the keyboard player hauling around that Hammond B3 or the Fender Rhodes or anything under their arms. Where should they start? What's the first thing they should be doing?
Well, if they're already experiencing any level of symptoms or dysfunction, restriction in their day-to-day activity, pain is the last thing to come and usually the first thing to go. So if they're already having those symptoms, they've likely had the underlying condition for months, if not years prior to that.
Would they notice that? You're saying years before that. Are there little telltale signs, or does it just pop up like that, or?
In a lot of cases, it will pop up like that. But I mean, for the most part, they'll notice some just increased frequency of stiffness and aching. They may want to, they may pop a couple of pills, it goes away, and they just kind of get in that routine until, that it gets deeper and deeper, kind of like a car part going bad. At first, you hear it clicking and clacking, but you don't think anything of it. And the more you let it sit there, the more frequent that sound's going to get. And eventually, it's going to go off and your car's going to stop.
Like the brakes squealing as you're driving down the road.
Right.
It's maybe a little too late. You know?
So any kind of indication of that. And I mean, since pain's the last thing to set in, just from a preventative point of view, you already know that you're overusing and undergoing a great deal of repetitive stress to all these different tendons and muscles and ligaments in your, whether it be your shoulder, arm, elbow, neck. I mean, on a preventative point of view, if you kind of understand that and what chiropractic does to alleviate and address that, a lot of people, just like I said, are completely asymptomatic when they come into chiropractor's office because they want to prevent that from happening. So that's the ideal way to do it, actually. But you know what? Pain is a big motivator. And people, in the absence of pain, you're really not that motivated.
Yeah.
Right. Regardless of whether their insurance policy may cover it or not, people find that chiropractic care is like a gym membership. It's very affordable, and it's definitely worth it if you use it that way.
So starting, is there a prime age? I mean, you can be a little baby, I guess, and start with chiropractic care.
You sure can, yes. But for the most part, I mean, again, if you've been playing an instrument for years upon years, you're going to have some subtle changes building up in the body that you should know sooner than later. In other words, you're going to feel it at 25 years of age. You don't have to be 50 or 60 years of age to start feeling all these things setting up in there.
And you said something I thought was relevant. We talk about athletes and their injuries.
Yeah.
They really beat their bodies up. But musicians, and you're right, to a certain extent, musicians are athletes in their own right.
Yeah.
It's just different muscles, different parts of the body that are being used. I watched some of these double kick drummers, or hitting that kick drum with both feet. And I'm just wondering, that repetition, after a while, it's just got to cause havoc on some part of the body.
It does, but even singers or clarinet players, I mean, a lot of them have TMJ, which is the jaw clicking in, and dysfunction with that. I mean, can you imagine a singer that makes his or her living with TMJ? I mean, it causes severe headaches and jaw pain, and they're either living with it, or they're taking a lot of drugs for it, or they're going in for a major surgical repair, and those things are usually pretty easy to fix because they're just very subtle misalignments in a joint that's been overused and imbalanced over the years. And those TMJ, for example, it works hand in hand with the upper neck muscles. It's all interconnected there. So if you have a problem in one area, you're probably going to have a problem in the adjacent area. And if you just work on one area and not the other, you're not going to correct the imbalance long term. It's just going to be a Band-Aid effect. And that's what so many people are doing, whether it be the TMJ or any kind of back problem, hip problem, shoulder problem. They're just working on one specific area and not all of the adjacent areas that's interconnected to that.
That's just it. It's all connected.
It sure is. A lot of people will say, hey, I don't really feel pain in my nerve or my bone or my joint. It's all in the muscle. Well, the muscle is where it ends up, because the muscle has to do all kind of work that the joint's no longer doing, because it's dysfunction is breaking down, but it's all interconnected. The muscle's connected to the tendons, connected to the ligaments, connected to the joint, it's connected to the cartilage, it's connected to the nerve. It's all intertwined and connected together.
By the time it gets to the muscle, it's the alarm going off, and the fire's already started, so to speak.
Yeah, chances are that problem started a lot deeper in the joint, and then it kind of worked its way out to the muscle. And now they've got a lot of nerve problems, too. If you've got a joint problem, you're eventually going to have a nerve issue. And now you're talking about significant activities of daily living being compromised and quality of life being compromised. If you're a musician and you plan on still playing that instrument 5 years from now, and you're already having some radiating neck and arm pain, you're probably not going to be playing that instrument too much longer.
We just heard a few months ago, Peter Frampton is having to retire from his touring because he's developed some issues to where it's affecting his playing. And I think, Clapton, I think I'm right, is kind of going through some of the same things. Of course, then you have guys like Pete Townsend who just can't hear because it's been too loud. But it does really come down to from the spine down to the fingertips, because unless you're a vocalist or a woodwind or brass player, you're using your fingers or your hands pretty much on everything.
Yes.
If you're starting to get tingling sensations or loss of feeling, then you've got issues.
Yeah.
Can that be fixed?
It can in most cases. I would say 90% of the cases, as long as it's caught in time. But, they're just like with anything else in the human body, there's a threshold of no return. You let that problem go long enough, and there's permanent joint damage, ligament damage, nerve damage, and that's when surgical intervention is required, or pain management. And you don't want to go down that road of being addicted to all these dangerous pain management drugs.
Or worst case scenario, retirement from what
retirement,
you're doing.
yeah.
Which then what do you do? Because if your hands are failing you, your feet are failing you,
I mean, if you're a musician, once again, and that's where you've been all your life, and you support your family with that, that's kind of where your livelihood is, not only physically but mentally. I mean, that's where your passion is, and if you can't all of a sudden do that, then it's all downhill from there.
What's the first symptom? Are there a series of symptoms? But let's say I'm a guitarist or a bassist, and I'm noticing something that may be leading to all these problems. What's the first thing I should be maybe noticing that would get me into a chiropractor?
Just localized stiffness, joint pain, maybe chronic fatigue. I mean, we talk about posture a lot in chiropractic, and you want to talk about posture. Somebody playing an instrument, the posture is everything, whether it's a guitar or they're breathing into a horn. A lot of people have, especially in today's computer age, their shoulders are rolled forward, their head and neck is forward. They're looking down in the angle more so on one side than the other. They're taking in less oxygen, and there's your chronic fatigue right there. And so all that builds up over time, and I think we can all agree less oxygen intake due to posture issues or whatever is going to lead to other chronic issues.
As we have this discussion, I find myself wanting to self-adjust my back and sit up a little straighter here. I guess it all starts with posture, right? It's just sitting up the correct way.
Your grandmother or a fourth grade teacher used to always pop you on the back or the hand for sitting and for slumping, And so a lot of people trivialize that, but a lot of health problems are really due to something as fundamental and simple as posture. And again, that starts in a very young age. All these kids carrying these heavy book bags that exceed 50% of their body weight. It's kind of where it all starts.
Yeah, and hey, Bob, if you don't mind if I jump in a little bit here, because I think I'm the typical case study, being a musician of 30 years and being that guy playing the guitar and everything about music really is, it lends itself to propensity to bad posture and bad habits, because I'm sitting down practicing for years, I'm sitting weird with my guitar in my lap, not the right posture. You're in the studio, you're recording, bad posture, you're on stage, you're carrying this heavy thing around every night, bad posture, so it becomes a habit. Getting on the tour bus and bad posture, bad sleeping. And so for me, year after year after year, all these chronic things. And so I'm not taking these steps to take care of myself the way I should. And so I find myself coming in to meet with Dr. Casey. Mm-hmm. Everything you were just saying is so funny because it's exactly what I've been dealing with, which is the tingling in the fingers, the compressed area in the spine from carrying a guitar on my back and then against the neck for so many years. And so I start feeling this deterioration. And again, then the symptoms start coming and I'm like, hey, man, I'm having some problems here, even getting to the point where it's going down into my chest and causing muscle spasms in and around my heart area. I'm thinking, man, am I having a heart attack or what's going on? And I actually ended up going into the emergency. They check everything out. They're like, no, you've got some stuff going on in your spine and all that. And I came in here real worried, like, man, can I? And it's been about, a little bit now. He's been working with me, and I literally do have my head in his hands, my neck in his hands. But really the whole, like, in less than just a couple months, I'm feeling amazingly better. I mean, all of a sudden I'm getting and moving around, and it does affect you mentally, man. It starts bumming you out. You're sitting around, you feel pain. You don't want to do the stuff you were doing. I want to encourage, again, everybody who's listening out there, because, again, our music community is large, and it's all people that do this music stuff for a living. Don't wait. Don't wait the 30 years. Get going now, because your instrument's not your tool. You're your tool. You are your greatest investment and your greatest tool. And don't buy thousands of dollars of equipment, but not put the time and money and energy and maintenance into your own body. And everything starts with the spine, because every nerve, muscle, all the blood flow, everything is going to come from that part of your body body, and it's got to function. If it doesn't function, then you're laid up. You're sitting, you're retiring, and you're out of the business. And I spend more time nowadays. When I was younger, we'd be talking about girls and the next show and what song we're working on. Now it's like, hey, what meds are you on? How you feeling? I got back problems. I got to go in for surgery. Really, I mean, as I've gotten older, 20, 30 years ago when I was getting started, you never had those conversations, but it's a real thing. And there's a lot of this town, it's all music people. A lot of them are sitting, they're still touring. They're still sitting in the studio. So I just want to, again, for my part, encourage people, don't wait. Take advantage of getting looked at, checking yourself out, and just getting on the right path to recovery for your body and your wellness and your mental health. Because I'm telling you, it's made already in a very short time. It's game changing. And I'm very thankful for it.
Most musicians, like athletes, recognize once they start some chiropractic adjustments, just a better overall enhanced performance, a quicker reaction time, and definitely less shoulder, elbow, wrist, finger, neck pain. And most of them end up coming to the conclusion, why didn't I start this 5 or 10 years ago, And most collegiate and professional teams now have a chiropractor on staff because they realize these great attributes.
Never too young.
Yes, right.
We're going to take another break, get another word in for our sponsor. Here in the studio today, Will Carter. Music Starts Here is with me. We have Dr. Bearden in the room with us, Action, Spine, and Joint. And you're listening to...
Hey, this is Chris Dyke, and you are listening to one of the coolest podcasts that you can get online these days. And it's with Bob Bender on the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Wow, I just joined the Music Starts Here community. This is a truly hidden gem for anyone in the music business. Whether you live in Nashville or anywhere else in the world, Music Starts Here is like a GPS for your music career. This is the place to be if you want to get advice and direction from some seriously talented musical people who have been where you want to go. Music news, events, and a great big community with resources for artists, songwriters, musicians, studio and tech, along with music business advice from pros in the industry, all on one site. Make sure you get your free profile now. Go to www.musicstartshere.org. That's musicstartshere.org.
You're listening to the business side of music.
We're back in the studio. Will Carter, Music Starts Here, our guest host today, along with Dr. Bearden, Action, Spine, and Joint. And we're talking about, let's face it, physical health for musicians, artists. It really drills down to that. You've worked on some pretty interesting people in this business, I guess.
Yes, well in excess of 30,000 patients over the past 25 years, so we've seen them all.
You find new things?
Yes, you do. I mean, different body styles, lifestyles, and preferences that people come in for. Pretty much anything from the head to the toes. A lot of people, when they think of chiropractic, they think of low back pain, but that's actually a small percentage of what we work on at the end of the day. Shoulder, knee pain, plantar fasciitis, TMJ, lots of headaches.
I never would have thought TMJ could be something that could be done through chiropractic healthcare.
It's just a misalignment of a joint, just like any other joint in the spine.
TMJ is, especially for singers, you said, or brass or woodwind players, it is something that can be, I don't know if resolved, I don't want to say cured, but is it something that really can get turned around and get back on the right path?
I mean, it's just amazing how the human body responds when you simply realign a joint that's been misaligned, just kind of like your car tires. Put them back in alignment. I mean, everything starts to work better. Yeah. It's pretty simple stuff, and the results are profound because, again, if you take someone that makes their living doing that and you've got something as simple but eventually complex as TMJ can be, and then you take something as simple as chiropractic and realign a joint versus breaking it apart with invasive surgical techniques, in so many cases, those can be corrected. Now, not in all cases. Some of them have to be sent out to, specialists and further analyzed. But in so many cases, it's just we don't see that.
At the end, it also boils down to healthcare, getting some exercise, eating right, trying to get good quality sleep, which in our business is tough to do on a good day, and regular visits to a chiropractor.
Yes, on a preventative basis. A lot of people say, what does that entail? Well, I mean, there's no cookie cutter approach. It could be completely, it could be once a year for this person over here. And if you got another person over here that's had 30, 40 years of chronic ailments in multiple areas, that can be twice a month after you've corrected the condition.
Yeah, and that's the first thing. You have to really correct that.
You have to stabilize it, and you have to correct it and rehabilitate it. So, I mean, it's always our prerogative to get a patient to the point to where they no longer need us symptomatically, release them from active care down to maintenance care, because that's where we want everyone. And maintenance care is not something you have to go with, but most people see such a great benefit from correcting an underlying structural problem they've had chronically for years. They want to maintain it because it takes a certain amount of time, money, and effort to get into a doctor's office like this and fix something you've had for years, and then all of a sudden not do anything for it for another 4 or 5 years. A lot of times that ball's going to roll back down the hill and you're going to have to start from square zero again.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
You got to do that. How can people find you? They come to Nashville. We got hundreds of thousands of people come to Nashville, Tennessee in the music business. Not only performers and entertainers, but, fans. How do they find you if they're here?
Well, our website's probably the best. Nashville Spine Doctor, abbreviated DR.com. NashvilleSpineDoctor.com. Action Spine and Joint. And unfortunately, we only have one location, and that's in West Nashville.
Yeah, it's easy to get to.
Yes, it is. Yeah, we have patients coming from Kentucky, Alabama, and across town, like this gentleman Will just said.
Yeah, one thing I love too, that you've made good use of that 20 plus years of being here, because it's kind of like being in the Star Trek Enterprise. All of the great technology. What I'm saying by that is I love that you can tell there's a passion for just staying on top of what's happening, the latest and greatest of stuff going on. And the staff's amazing. I got to say, being here, I love your staff. I love the facilities. You guys have just done an amazing job, warm and welcoming. And again, all the cool stuff you've got. I'm on a decompression kind of a program, and I know you do laser. So talk a little bit about some of that, more of the modern stuff, because I definitely know there's some newer things you guys do that are more specialized than a lot of other people.
Yeah, since we see such a wide variety of people and conditions, we have all kind of gadgets and different tables to accommodate just about anybody. But at the end of the day, there's a certain amount of people that we can't help, and we let you know that when you first come in. But we do a lot of laser. We have the same laser that the Titans and the Preds have on staff, just because it jumpstarts healing of damaged chronic connective tissue like ligaments and joints, and it floods the area with new fresh oxygen, blood circulation, and it helps to kind of pull out chronic inflammation, break up scar tissue. And there's just all kind of things that a laser approach or spinal decompression, synergistically using the 2 or 3 of them together can accomplish. Again, not overnight. There's a certain amount of time and effort and commitment, both from the practitioner and the patient, after they've had a problem for so long. And unfortunately, most people, they wait to go to the chiropractor till they just have tried everything else. And it makes our job harder, and it makes things tougher on that patient too. So the best thing to do is not cover up a reoccurring symptom with a drug over and over and over again until you just can't do it anymore. Catch it on the front end, try to attack it without drugs, without surgery, try to fix and correct the underlying problem that's causing that symptom, versus the other way around. But unfortunately, even in this day and age, a lot of people don't go that route. They treat the symptom first and the problem later. And it just makes for a lot more, headache and heartache for everyone.
And just to put a cap on that, from an experience I just recently had, talking about earlier, when I went in thinking I was having the heart issue. So I go in, and the ER doctor who actually took care of me, after running all the tests and everything, and coming to the conclusion that it had nothing to do with my heart, it was something to do with what was going on in my spine. And the only reason he knew that it was because he had let it go in himself for over 13 years, where he had gotten addicted to opioids and different drugs and stuff like that, and eventually had to have the surgery. And he says, and I was one of the lucky ones, because I'm in the medical field. I was able to find the perfect guy who could do exactly. He goes, but I waited too long. He goes, I should have been doing it. I'm telling you this now. He goes, no, most doctors would never say this to you. Get into a chiropractor. You find somebody good that can help you, and you take care of that now, or you'll regret it later. He goes, because I can't even turn my head all the way. He goes, one side I can only go a partial. The other way he goes, so you lose that range of motion and all the pain I went through for all those years. He goes, it's just not worth it if you can be proactive and do something about it today. So just wanted to share that, because it's important when a guy like that at his level telling me that, it really spoke like, hey, be serious about this.
We get, thank you for sharing that. We get stories like that every day and get, quite frankly, we get spoiled hearing those stories. And so that's a good thing. But 20% of our practice on any given week is actually referrals from other medical doctors because, they get it now, especially the younger ones that have actually been educated on that in school. So it's, at 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, just a larger segment of the population will continue to be going to utilizing chiropractors as the first line of defense, trying to avoid the knife and the dangerous, pain pills.
And as we said in the beginning of this conversation, it's not considered alternative anymore. It's
not.
Mainstream. And I think you're right. I think that younger generation out there, if they don't understand it, is smart enough to figure it out that it does make sense.
Yes.
Thanks for being on the show. This is great.
Thank you for
Good
having
information.
me. Very exciting. Yes.
Will, thank you.
My pleasure.
Hey, don't forget to check out our affiliates, including Lab Canna, fine hemp products since 2014. Click on their link on our website for more information and how to order their product line. Also, don't forget to check out our other affiliate, Music Starts Here. You can find them at www.musicstartshere.org. Probably the best one-stop shop for the singer, songwriter, or aspiring musician who is relocating to Nashville or wants to. Also, shameless plug for the business side of music. Become a YouTube subscriber. Check out our website at www.businesssideofmusic.com. Follow us on Facebook at the Business Side of Music Podcast or on Twitter at Business Side of Music Podcast.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound designed by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.